What would the 2023 college football playoff field have looked like if we expanded all the way up to 12 teams? Let's go over the original 14 playoff format as we had this past year. Michigan obviously was number 1, Washington was number 2, Texas was number 3. Big controversy was at number 4, Alabama versus Florida State, and they obviously went with Alabama. Florida State was the only Power 5 undefeated champion in the history of the CFP to not make the 14 playoff. Alabama got over them. They were obviously the better team. So, this is the 14 playoff. What would the 12-team playoff have looked like if it was expanded to that much? We're going to start off with the number 1 overall seed, obviously, and that would be the Michigan Wolverines. Team that went 13-0 for the second consecutive season. They went 4-0 against the analytic top 40. Strength of schedule was pretty weak. They were one of the weakest teams in the country, but the first 8 opponents they played, no other team in the AP poll era has ever scored more than 30 or more points in a game and held their opponents to 10 or less points in the first 8 games. No other team has ever done that. Michigan was the only team in the AP poll era to do that. Down the stretch, they played 4 consecutive teams rated in the top 40, including the win over Penn State and Ohio State and Maryland without Jim Harbaugh as their head coach. They beat Iowa in the Big Ten Championship game 26-0 to get undefeated 13-0. And they get the number 1 seed in this playoff. The number 2 seed would be the Washington Huskies out of the Pac-12, a team that played one of the hardest schedules in the entire country. Strength of schedule was 4th. They played 6 teams rated in the top 40, actually, and they went 6-0 against them. Actually, all 6 of those were rated in the top 25 of the power ratings. So that just goes to show you how deep the Pac-12 was, how good Washington was, how amazing their entire offense, their entire team was, and they were well deserving of the number 2 spot in this scenario. The number 3 team would be the Texas Longhorns, finished 12-1, Big 12 champion. Only loss was on the last 30 seconds to Oklahoma. Strength of schedule, though, was number 12. They had, in my opinion, the best non-conference win in all of college football this year at Alabama on the road, second week of the season. Rest of the season, they played 8 teams rated in the top 40. Like I said, the only loss was to Oklahoma. They also won 7 other games going down the stretch, including the conference championship game against Oklahoma State. They blew them out 49-21. With the Big 12 conference champ for the first time since 2009, and they get the 3 seed in this playoff. The final 4 seed would be the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, the biggest controversy, like I said, over the 4 seed and the 5 seed was between Alabama and Florida State, in which Florida State got left out. They got the 5 seed. Alabama got the 4 seed. I'm going to compare these resumes to you real quick, and this will basically be a no-brainer as to why Alabama was number 4 and why Florida State was number 5. Alabama had the 5th rated strength of schedule in the entire country, while Florida State was not even in the top 50. Alabama played 8 teams in the top 40. Florida State played 5. And if you want to go over the top 4, top 5 wins of each team, Alabama played 3 teams in the top 10. Florida State played 0. Alabama also had the best win of the entire season against number 2 Georgia in the SEC championship game. Florida State's best win was against LSU. That was also a team Alabama beat in the same season. So, I mean, the strength of schedule, the strength of record, where do you want to put it, favors Alabama in every sense of the word, and that's why they got the 4 seed over Florida State, who still did enough to get the 5 seed and get a home playoff game in the first round. The 6 seed would go to the Georgia Bulldogs, and this team was number 1 going into last week of the season, and they dropped all the way to 6. I think most of that was due because of their strength of schedule. They finished 30th in the regular season. Only loss, like I said, in the last 2 years was to Alabama in the conference championship game, but their non-conference strength of schedule, Tennessee Martin, Ball State, UAB, and Georgia Tech. Only one of those teams is rated in the top 100, so their non-conference strength of schedule was absolutely atrocious. Even in their conference schedule, they did play 7 teams rated in the top 40, but their non-conference really brought them down. Yes, they went undefeated in the regular season, but the loss against Alabama dropped them out of the top 4. They did not win their conference, but they still get the 6th seed in this bracket. The 7th seed would be the Ohio State Buckeyes. Finished 11-1. Only loss was to the number 1 overall seed, Michigan. They played 5 teams in the top 40. They went 4-1 against those said teams. They played a really good Notre Dame team on the road. They won on the last play of the game. Other than that, they beat a really good Penn State team. So they did enough to get the 7th seed in this hypothetical bracket, with their strength of schedule being number 7 in the entire country. And they would have a first round playoff game at home. So number 8 seed, the final team to get a home playoff game in the first round would be the Oregon Ducks, 11-2 out of the Pac-12. Only 2 losses were to the number 2 seed Washington, power rated number 4. It's played 6 teams in the top 40, but at the same time, the rest of their schedule was not that difficult. That's where they finished outside the top 50 in the strength of schedule rankings. They played Texas Tech, Utah, USC, and Oregon State. They're 4 wins in the top 40. But they also played Portland State out of the FCS, Hawaii, Stanford, and Colorado, and Arizona State. All really bad teams. That's why their strength of schedule is so low. But they still were one of the better teams at offense throughout the whole season. They had the top 10 in offense and defense analytically, and they get the 8 seed in this bracket. The 9 seed, who they will face in the first round, would be the Ole Miss Rebels out of the SEC. 10-2, 2 losses were to number 3 rated, power rated Alabama, and number 2 power rated Georgia. They played 5 teams overall in the top 40. They beat 3 of them. Straight of the schedule was still pretty high though. They rated at the top 20. So Georgia or Ole Miss gets the 9 seed. Not much else to say. Had pretty decent wins against LSU, Auburn, and Texas A&M to get the 9 seed in this, and they will go on the road to Eugene to face the Oregon Ducks. The 10 seed would be the Missouri Tigers, one of the surprise teams in the entire country. Got the 10-2, 10 wins, finished 4-2 against the power-rated top 40. Lost to LSU and Georgia. Still beat Tennessee, Florida, Kentucky, and a really good Big 12 team, Kansas State. They get the 10 wins. They get the 10th seed in this bracket. They will face Ohio State on the road in Columbus. The 11th seed would go to the Penn State Nittany Lions, team that finished 10-2. Only 2 losses were to number 5 rated Ohio State and the number 1 rated Michigan Wolverines. They got outscored by 8 points in those 2 losses. But in their 10 wins, they outscored their opponents by 37 points a game. That just goes to show how good this team was, but how much better the top 2 teams in their division were. The Penn State still had a decent strength of schedule, rated 28th. And obviously, like I said, their points per game margin was plenty much to get them in this field of 12, get the 11th seed in this hypothetical bracket. The final team to get the 12th seed, I'm going to go a little offbeat here, cheat a little here, and we're going to say the American Conference champ, SMU Mustangs, 11-2. Get in the final spot, the 6th highest rated conference champion to get in this playoff bracket. Now I'm going to compare it to you guys why I would put SMU in over the Liberty Flames, because as you see here on the right, SMU's schedule, they played 2 teams rated in the top 40. They lost to both of them, Oklahoma and TCU. They did not play they only played 2 other teams rated inside the top 100 of the power ratings. That was Tulane and Memphis. Yet they beat both of them, but their strength of schedule was rated 85th in the country. Now, why I chose SMU over the Liberty Flames, we'll compare schedules and resumes. SMU had the 85th rated strength of schedule. Meanwhile, Liberty Flames, even though they finished 13-0 or undefeated, won their conference championship, they had the 124th rated strength of schedule. They played 0 teams rated inside the top 85, and that's why I would put the SMU Mustangs over the Liberty Flame as your last team in this field of 12. So, that's how the field goes. Let's go over each game round by round to crown a hypothetical national champion. We'll start out with the first round. That is the Oregon Ducks versus the Ole Miss Rebels. I do believe Oregon wins this. I think they have a better offense. Both teams have a really good offense. Oregon just has that much better of a defense. I think they get it done at home in the first round against Ole Miss. Next game would be Florida State against SMU. How much I ragged on Florida State for the strength of schedule and their strength of resume and how bad they were playing with their backup quarterback. There's no doubt they would just romp on the AAC champion. Their defense was lights out against most teams in the country. I think they would be lights out again against the American Conference champion. They moved on to the quarterfinals to face Alabama. The other game on the right side, Ohio State taking on Missouri. I think this is going to be a repeat of real life. I think Missouri would beat Ohio State, even though Ohio State would have their full squad. I think Missouri still proved on the field that they were a tougher team, they were a better team, and they would get to 11 wins, and they go out to the quarterfinals to face Washington. Final game of the first round would be Georgia Bulldogs against Penn State Nittany Lions. I think how good Penn State was against everybody else not named Ohio State or Michigan, I think there's still no match for Georgia. Going into this, they were the number 1 rated talent composite team in the entire country, and I think they get the job done against Penn State in the first round to go on and face the quarterfinals. First matchup of the quarterfinals, we're going to have Michigan against Oregon, future Big Ten opponents. I think Michigan gets it done. I think Bo Nix passes for a lot of yards, and Michigan's defense holds them in check for most of the game. They win comfortably by at least 2 scores. Michigan goes on to the semifinals in the Rose Bowl game, where they face the winner of Florida State and Alabama. Now, I think this would almost be a remake of the Georgia versus Florida State game in real life. I think Alabama destroys them. I think it's not even close. 3+ scores. Alabama's a much more talented team. Florida State's a much different team without their quarterback, and they get it done. They go on to the semifinals to face Michigan in the Rose Bowl. The other side of the bracket, Washington taking on the Missouri Tigers. I don't think this one's going to be that much of a competition either. I think Washington with the receivers gets it done. destroys Missouri. Missouri was a good team. They had a good story. Their coach is kind of goofy, but I think Washington just had a better team all year. Their offense was just so prolific. Their receiving core was lights out. Yes, Ohio State had a really good receiving core. Washington's might have been better, and I think it would be the ultimate deciding factor of why Washington would win this game. Final matchup of the quarterfinals, Georgia taking on Texas, future SEC opponents. I think in the end, how good Texas was, I think Georgia still has enough more talent. I think they match up good with Texas. They're both physical on the defensive line. I think Georgia's just going to be a little more physical. Pound the rock. Carson Beck's going to be just as good as Quinn Ewers, and I think Georgia just has enough talent, enough positions to move on to the semifinals against Washington. So the semifinal round pits off in real life. Michigan against Alabama in the Rose Bowl. I don't think there's going to be any difference in this. I think it's an all-time classic game again, but I think Michigan still gets it done. They move on to 15-0 to the national championship game. Now, the other side of the bracket, this would be an interesting matchup. Georgia, throughout the last 2 years, has had very much difficulty with teams that have really good receivers. We saw against Ohio State in 2022, they could not defend against Marvin Harrison Jr., Igbuka, all their receiving core, and they had trouble, and they got away with one. We saw in 2021 when Jameson Williams and Alabama were healthy, they'd had a very bad matchup with them, and they destroyed them by more than 3 scores as well. This might be the best receiving core Georgia has faced in the last 3 years against Washington. Odunze and the rest of their squad, along with Penix, is dueling. Do I think it's enough for Washington to win this game and Georgia lose it? I do not. I think Georgia still wins this. I think they're just too much more talented than Washington. Yeah, they won the Joe Moore Award for Best Offensive Line Unit, but I think Washington's defense is kind of its suspect. We saw in the national championship game against Michigan, they just kind of grounded out and they eventually just broke. And when Penix and their offense, when they don't have 1 or 2 drives, their defense is just not going to hold up against a more physical team like Georgia. And I think Georgia gets it done to face Michigan in the national championship game. Now, we were here 2 years ago. Michigan faced Georgia in the semifinals. Georgia romped on them. Here we are again 2 years later in 2023. Michigan against Georgia. The two teams that everybody thought should have been playing for the national championship in real life. Both teams basically have the same style of offense, same style of defense, both physical as hell, 2 best defenses in the entire country. Who would have came out on top in this hypothetical matchup? I think a national champion would still be the Michigan Wolverines. I think they match up perfectly with Georgia. I think they would put Carson Beck into freaking hellhole, and I think Michigan, I don't think they'd win by 21 points like it did against Washington, but I think this game would be a lot different than people think. I think Georgia might still be the Vegas favorite. I think Michigan wins by at least 7 points, and they are the 12-team national champion in this hypothetical scenario. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for all future videos regarding college football content for this channel, and I'll see you guys next time.